So starting late, yeah, I was at the Preservation Awards downtown. I was trying to leave. People kept talking to me, and trying to. So. But thank y'all for coming out today. So my name is Fennel, for those who don't know me. Director of the Lexington County Museum, just down the road a little bit. I'll explain a little bit more about the museum after the main part of the presentation here. I've got some brochures. One thing, you do so many of these presentations over the years, and one thing you learn is that if you give out brochures at the beginning, everybody will just sit there and read the brochure. They won't pay attention to you, so I want y'all to pay attention to me. But either way, so today we're going to talk about Lexington County during the American Revolution here. Of course, it's the 250th of the Declaration of Independence this year, and so a perfect time to kind of talk about it. Also the chairperson of the Lexington County 250th Committee, and I'll tell you more about that at the end as well. But without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started here. And if you have any questions along the way, just let me know. All right. So one of the things, for those who've seen me speak before, that I like to do, I like to give a lot of background, and maybe too much, but I'll let y'all decide about that. But either way, just to kind of get you up to speed and talk about how we get to the situation in the American Revolution. So not to go too way in depth here, but basically, you've got settlement that occurs down in West Ashley, outside of Charleston, 1670, and of course, when those settlers come, they encounter Native Americans already here, and so these Native Americans welcome them for the most part, but you have this kind of movement that goes on. Some of these Native Americans become allies and trading partners with the colonists, and others become enemies, and they move farther away to get away from them. And so this kind of goes back and forth, this dynamic. And one tribe that moves into the Low Country to take advantage of trade and protection, it's called the Yamasee. And of course, you drive down I-95 today, there's a little small town down there called Yamasee. Anyway, so the Yamasee move in to basically give it a reservation, what we would call a reservation, down in kind of Jasper, Hampton, Beaufort counties. They, like I said, become trading partners with the colony. A whole bunch of things kind of go wrong. We don't have time to get into today, but it's very fascinating. There's a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of miscommunication. Some of these Yamasee get, they get very deeply in debt. For example, one thing that goes wrong is the way they were paying their debts for many years is through the deerskin trade. Deer population plummets about 1711, 1712. And so they kind of have no way to pay their debts, and so they have to turn to, declaring war on other tribes to capture slaves to help pay their debts. Anyway, by 1715, the Yamasee believe that they are going to be attacked by the colony in South Carolina. They are convinced of that, so they decide to attack first. And they start this devastating conflict called the Yamasee War. Well, in what would become Lexington County, you had a tribe that was around at that point. They were kind of nomadic somewhat, called the Congaree. So the Congaree and the Catawba and some of these other backcountry tribes decide to join in the war on the side of the Yamasee. So they join together, they go down, they get defeated at the battle near modern-day Somerville, retreat, and the Congaree decide, that they no longer want to be here. So they leave this area, at first go to what's now Conway, and then go up to join the Catawba up in what's now York County. And so a lot of these areas after the Yamasee War become somewhat vacant after that. Maybe not completely, but somewhat. The Yamasee are driven out of South Carolina by 1718. As Andy Thomas will tell you, the war's not over at that point, but we don't have time to go into all that today. But the war changes things, and so the war changes colonial society, makes it more fearful. They become trading partners and allies with the Cherokee, but they were trading partners and allies with the Yamasee, and look what happened there. So they become very fearful of what may happen if the Cherokee were to attack. Because they're allied with the Cherokee, they're now enemies with the Creek. So what happens if the Creek attack? They are also importing a huge number of enslaved Africans to work the rice plantations. So there was always this possibility of a slave rebellion. And in many of these areas, there were many more enslaved people than there were free. So a governor named Robert Johnson comes along in the 1730s and kind of looks at the situation and says, you know, we've got these potential enemies on our borders. We've got this enslaved population that may rebel. What if we take this land out here in the backcountry, open it up for settlement, and encourage Europeans to come over and settle? That way, it'll do two things. Number one, get more white people here, free white people. And if the Cherokee or the Creek were to attack, they'll absorb the blow. And we here in the low country, where the money and the power is, we'll be able to kind of sit back for a little. They provide a buffer. Well, anyway, so they create these townships, as you can see here, and I stole this from Walter Eggers' History of South Carolina book, so I've got to give him credit for this. But of course, in mostly the area that would become Lexington County right there, you see, we've got a township called Saxagatha at that point. Now, it was started as the Congarese, but it's renamed in 1736 Saxagatha after the German Princess Augusta of Saxagatha. She marries into the English royal family. In what will become Lexington County, they start to attract, at first, German-speaking Swiss people. And so these are some names you still see around today. You've got the Friday family. Of course, Friday's Ferry would become very important in the development of this area. Later, Revolutionary War skirmish would take place there. The Giger family, the Boozer family, my favorite, the Sen family. And we've got the Sen family cabin at the museum. And so when I take people on tour and I don't explain that it's a family name and I say this is the Sen cabin, as you can imagine, sometimes you get some looks. I have to remember that.
I'm going for Yibby.
Yeah. So, then later, mainly in the 1750s, you had what we would call Germans coming over. Of course, Germany didn't exist as a country at that point, and these were, kind of a lot of the big family names you see around Lexington County today. The Harmons, the Kaufmans, the Sheeleys, those kind of big names. Well, anyway, so they came over, and really, they were not isolated in any way. I mean, you still had trading paths, of course. This area is very important because of the three trading paths that came together. You had what was called the Cherokee Trail, and part of it was the Old State Road that went from Charleston to the Congarese, right here, almost in what will become Cayce. And then the Cherokee Trail that went to the lower towns of the Cherokee, and the Catawba or the Occaneechi path that went up into the Catawba territory, and on into North Carolina and Virginia. So they had these major trading paths, but of course they do kind of have their own kind of identity, and a little bit different than other parts of South Carolina. So let me go ahead and just get forward here. And a lot of the Germans that come over, come from this province right here, Baden-Württemberg state, I should say, what is today. And so historically, this whole area right here was called Swabia. And it's very interesting, I think, that if you look at kind of stereotypes of Schwabish culture, one thing that people say is that Schwabish people love to add L-E to the end of words. And apparently they love it so much they did it to names. And you can kind of see that in some of the names of the people that settled here. So Corley, big name in Lexington County, originally in German was Carla. And you can see that L-E at the end of that K-A-R-L-E. Sheely was originally Shula, that L-E sound at the end of it. So very kind of interesting to see, some of this, kind of going forward like that. All right. And this is another map of Saxagatha. One thing that, not to get too way in depth here, but you read about the people that settled here and some of their descendants, and there are, kind of three things that come up again and again. One is that they were supposed to be a very thrifty people. Some people would say cheap, but thrift is a good way of putting it. It's kind of off topic, but that's still a stereotype of kind of people in the Dutch Fork, the area between the Broads and Saluda today. My predecessor, we would go eat at Sheely's Barbecue, and on Mondays, it's a little bit cheaper to eat the buffet than it is on other days, and so he would call that Dutch Fork Day, is what he would call it. He also told me about a man, I don't know how true this is just a story he told me, that he knew a man that only bought one light bulb for his entire house, and he would take it from room to room. That's kind of how thrifty he was. So again, I don't know how true that is. But they were supposed to be thrifty. They were supposed to be superstitious, and it's a whole other presentation I do. But the people that settled here, superstition was what we would call superstition. It was very important to them. They believed in witches. They believed in hexes. They believed in ghosts. And so the third thing is they were supposed to have been very loyal to the state. And again, we'll kind of see how that transpires when the American Revolution breaks out. All right. Another map showing Saxe-Gotha. This is from the Mouzon map that is very kind of famous here. So, kind of moving forward a little bit. So you get a lot of people moving to Saxe-Gotha. I mean, you get as many as 1,000 people here by 1760. Again, like I mentioned before, you've got the Cherokee that become trading partners and allies with the colony of South Carolina. But unfortunately, a lot of things that happen with the Yamasee happen with the Cherokee. A lot of mistakes are repeated. And you see a lot of miscommunication and a lot of misunderstandings going on. And and the Cherokee, again, get deeply in debt to the colony of South Carolina. And so one of the things that happens is that the Cherokee, they join in on the colony of South Carolina with the French and Indian War. So they go up to Pennsylvania to help fight on the side of the English and the colonies as part of the French and Indian War. And on the way back through Virginia in 1758, Virginians actually attacked Cherokee and killed a lot of them. And so this is the final straw for the Cherokee. So they've had enough. Even though it wasn't Carolinians who were doing the killing, it was Virginians. They decided to declare war on the colony of South Carolina and start the devastating Cherokee War that would break out. It was kind of that southern part of the French and Indian War. And let me move forward here. And so, again, here in what would become Lexington County, here in what was then Saxe-Gotha, you don't have any battles that take place during the Cherokee War. That all happened up in the upstate. But one thing that occurs is that you have Cherokee warriors that come down and would attack settlers. They would burn farms. They would kill cattle. And even if they actually weren't in the area, the kind of paranoia that kind of takes over at that point really disrupted life for many of the people that lived in Saxe-Gotha. And so what you had is you actually had some deaths that occur. And this is a marker that was erected in 2003. And this is over off of Corley Mill Road today. And so this is a marker that was dedicated to Jacob, what we would say Drafts, then it was Threfs, that kind of German last name. And a man, they don't know his first name or last name, whichever one, but a man called Jenkins. And he was killed and scalped by Cherokee Indians on March 10th, 1760. And that's from the South Carolina Gazette, I think, is where they get that information from. But this is a marker that was erected. This is off topic, but I got a phone call last week from a real estate agent who is trying to sell a house that is like right behind this. And so she goes, I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but there's some kind of big piece of stone and it's got some writing on it. And it's something about the Cherokee. And I was like, I know exactly what you're talking about. And she's like, oh, you know it. I was like, yes, ma'am, I sure do. But anyway, so the Cherokee would attack. Again, even if they didn't attack, there were rumors going around. And so what you had developed is you had these kind of fortified farms, these fortified plantations that developed. And basically you would have these, these farms that would have a palisade wall around it. And when there were rumors of Cherokee warriors in the neighborhood, a lot of families would become refugees and they would go to these fortified farms to find refuge and protection. And so you had several of these kind of around. There was one that I'll talk about a little bit later, Dreer's Fort. It was Godfrey Dreer's farm. It was located where modern-day River Bluff High School is, right around there. Again, I think at one point, I think there was something like, hundreds of people that found refuge there. There were several around, the area as well. But anyway, the Cherokee War ends in the summer of 1761 when the Cherokee are defeated and sue for peace. And one thing I didn't mention too is that the Congarese, as this area was called, was a staging ground for armies going to the backcountry to fight the Cherokee. All right. So moving forward once again. So the Cherokee War, again, is a devastating conflict. Not only does it cause death and really change the dynamics between the Cherokee and the colony, it also leads to some changes in society that will have ripple effects later on. So one of the things that you see is the Cherokee War leads to some people losing their land. They're kind of driven off their land. And in some cases, they they just kind of continue to hunt and fish and to live off the land. In other cases, you have some people that turn to illegal activities. And so one thing, and I forgot to mention this too, really, you see this play throughout the 1700s and throughout part of the 1800s as well. But there's a whole kind of push and pull between the low country and backcountry for power. So during this time period, before 1769, what you see is that the entire backcountry, so basically everything beyond 50 miles away from the sea, there's only one representative in the colonial legislature representing the backcountry. We kind of get to this later on. We talk about taxation without representation. I mean, that is the backcountry of South Carolina, if there ever was one. You've got that going on, and the colony of South Carolina, the colonial government, there's no court system in the backcountry. If you wanted to go to court, you have to go to Charleston. If you wanted to register a deed, you have to go to Charleston. You have to serve in a jury. You have to serve as a witness. You have to go to Charleston. There's no law enforcement, really, in this area at that point. There are justices of the peace, but they have very limited power, where they're basically pointless, and they only come around every so often. So there's no permanent law enforcement. There's no court system. And so some of these people that are driven off their land turn to banditry, I guess you'd say. And then you also have bad people out there. So you also have these kind of bandit gangs, and they go around and they rob, they rape, they pillage, they cause trouble. And there's nothing really that the settlers here can do about it at that point. And so you also have a situation where this was kind of a society in flux in a lot of ways. And so you had two groups of people to kind of simplify things. And you had a group of people that wanted to, I guess you'd say, quote unquote, civilize this area. You had a group of people, these farmers, that wanted a more plantation-based system like you have in the low country, where you have settled farms and plantations, a very agricultural society. And then on the other hand, you had some people that wanted to continue the way they were living at that moment, which was, to put it in their terms, to quote, live like Indians. These were people that were living off the land, they were hunting, they were fishing, they maybe were growing some stuff, but they were mainly living off the land. So these folks, when they would go hunting, a lot of times they were hunting at night. They would hunt by fire. So they'd have a torch with them and basically look for the reflections in the eyes of the animals, and then they would fire. And if they managed to hit the animal, sometimes it was a deer, which if it was, great. Sometimes it was your neighbor's cow. And as you can imagine, that does not go well for neighborly relations there. So these people that had animals that were ranching and farming were getting upset about this because their animals were getting killed by some of these people that, again, were, quote, living like Indians. And even if they hit a deer, a lot of times they would basically butcher it right there on the spot, take what they wanted, and leave the rest. And so this would sometimes attract wolves and other predators, which then, a lot of these farmers in the area would then attack their cattle or their pigs. And so they were still upset about this. So they wanted to get rid of that kind of lifestyle. So you had this kind of push and pull going on. And so things kind of come to a head after the Cherokee War. And a lot of the people that lived here, about probably 15% of the population, male population anyway, decided to take things into their own hands. And so they started what was called the regulator movement. And so the regulator movement kind of had a two-pronged approach. And so number one, they acted as vigilantes. They acted as law enforcement. So they took the law into their own hands and tried to punish those that were doing things wrong in their eyes. And they also wanted to basically kind of get rid of those people who were hunting and fishing and living off the land like that. And they also were trying to push for more political power and for some kind of permanent law enforcement and court system in the backcountry. They wanted to, be heard by the colonial government. And again, this is a growing kind of divide between low country and backcountry during this time period. Well, anyway, the regulators spring up, they take the law in their own hands, they punish people they think need to be punished. And a lot of times vigilante groups get out of control. And so that happened here. And so you had another group called the moderators that sprang up to basically oppose the regulators. And so you almost had these pitched battles that take place between these two groups. But fortunately, kind of cooler heads prevail. There is a meeting between the regulators and the moderators that happens on March 25th, 1769, at the Congaree. So basically, right around where we are today. And they declare a truce. And at the same time, they're petitioning the colonial government, for more representation, for law enforcement, for courts. And after this, the colonial legislature gets permission from England to enact these changes. And so there actually are courts established in the backcountry. They give them a little more political power, not too much, but a little more, and actually kind of give some law enforcement in the backcountry. But the reason I bring these things up is because, like I said, there's a growing divide between upcountry and low country, and there's also a growing divide in the backcountry between people. And so these moderator-regulator splits, they just don't get over this as soon as that movement's over. This kind of hatred that it inspires continues. And this is not a complete 100%, but a lot of the regulators later in the American Revolution become patriots, and a lot of the moderators become loyalists during the war. And again, this wasn't always the case, but that's a generalized kind of concept there. So this is a very tumultuous time, and one that, again, has ripple effects later on during the American Revolution. One thing that I did mention too, and I'll tell you all this because I think it's very interesting, but probably near kind of St. Andrews Road, Earl area, there was a guy named Jacob Weber. He was a Swiss immigrant, and after the Cherokee War, he kind of had, I think he went through kind of a religious crisis, and so he started to read the Bible. Nothing wrong with that. Then he started to kind of hold Bible studies for people. Nothing wrong with that. Then he became, in his own words, a minister. Excuse me. Nothing wrong. Well, maybe something wrong with that. But anyway, but things really kind of went in the left field whenever he kind of gathered a flock of people. And there's, a lot of legend tied up in this, but some people said that he started to practice what we would call cult-like activities, kind of making people cut ties with their family, that sort of stuff. But they started to practice animal sacrifice and some other Old Testament rules. There were rumors that they were dancing naked in the woods as part of their ceremonies, which I don't know about, what churches y'all go to or anything like that, but, the Baptist church I grew up in, we didn't do that. So it was a lot more fun, maybe, I don't know. But anyway, but things really kind of, got out of hand when Jacob Weber said that not only was he a minister of God, but that he was God himself. and then there was a man named Hans Schmidt-Peter, who was Jesus Christ, and there was a guy named Dauber, who may have been an escaped slave, who was the Holy Spirit. And so, again, this is all right after the Cherokee War, and this is in a situation where there's no law enforcement or anything. And so the minister that was here in Saxe-Gotha, the only ordained minister at the time that we know of, was a man named, Christian Theus. I can think of his name there for a minute. And anyway, Christian Theus, he lived, in this area, especially closer to Sandy Run. And there's some speculation, amongst historians about how good of a minister he was. Later on, he's called a good minister. There's a man named Johann Boltius who ran a community down in Georgia. It was supposed to be a Lutheran utopia. And it's kind of hard to take what he says completely 100% factually, because he was, I think, jealous of the people here, because his community wasn't really growing where Saxe-Gotha was. And so I'm kind of going on a detour here. But one thing that he says is that the people here in Saxe-Gotha, they lived swinishly, and that the people here, that their God was their stomach, is what he said. Anyway, but he says that Christian Theus was not a good man. So again, take that, however you will. But either way, Christian Theus goes to Jacob Weber's minister, when he's ministering. And apparently Jacob Weber recognizes Christian Theus and addresses him as a little parson, who's trying to insult him, and basically says, "Do you not accept that I'm God the Father?" And Christian Theus, again, may not have been a good minister, but either way, he says, "Absolutely not. That's crazy. Y'all are crazy." And Jacob Weber says, "Get it." And so the congregation tries to converge on Christian Theus. He runs for his life. He makes it to the Broad River, where he finds a boat with an enslaved person. He says, "Get me the heck out of here." And so he escapes with his life, and then tries to get the authorities in Charleston to do something about it. He tries to get them to send the militia up, because again, there's no law enforcement, no court system. And apparently the people in Charleston are like, "You crazy Germans, what are y'all doing?" So anyway, Christian Theus has no success with that. Hans Schmidt-Peter, he then, and along with Dauber, if they are Jesus and the Holy Spirit, they should have powers. And so they decide to test this out. And so they murder an unsuspecting farmer with the intent of raising him back to life, which I don't want to spoil it for anybody. They were unsuccessful in doing. But this apparently enraged Jacob Weber. And he said, "Dauber, you're not the Holy Spirit. You're actually Satan in disguise." And so they, if I remember correctly, I may have gotten this backward, but they put him between two mattresses and trampled him to death. Mm-hmm. Then he said, "Schmidt-Peter, you're not Jesus Christ. You're actually Satan in disguise as well." So they tied him to a tree and cut him to death. And so this was enough to get the attention of the colonial government. They sent the militia up. They arrested, I believe, 6 people in the Weberites, as they were called. They banished the rest, which I think meant they went across the river and then came right back. But they took those 6 to Charleston. 5 were pardoned. Jacob Weber was put on trial and found guilty. He confessed. And then on his way to be hanged, he recanted his confession and said that he was going to rise from the dead in 3 days. And again, I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but that didn't happen. So that's a crazy thing that happened. All right, so moving on here. So this, I showed this. There's a very good book that's out there, Parker's Guide to the American Revolution in South Carolina. If you haven't seen it, it's a very, very valuable resource. Jack Parker did this, and basically he tried to document every Revolutionary War battle or skirmish site, along with some other kind of interesting events, and he has it divided by county. And the really cool thing is he provides kind of a summary of that battle and skirmish, and along with the date and all that. But he also provides a number that he calls like a confidence level. So basically, how confident historians are that the battle occurred where he has it listed. In some cases, it's a 5 that we're 100% certain it happened at Kings Mountain, some of these other bigger sites. And some of the other ones that are a little more mysterious, he's got down as a 1. It's like maybe this general area, or maybe there's some doubt about whether it actually occurred or not. But very good book there. And so these are the battle skirmishes that occurred in Lexington County. The American Revolution breaks out. You got men and Tennant and Drayton that come up to Saxe-Gotha, to the Congarese, and basically say, hey, join us. And the people here, again, there's already that rift that has grown between backcountry and Charleston and the low country. There's also a desire to remain neutral, and there's a fear of losing their land if they were to take part in this rebellion. First of all, I don't think they felt like it was their rebellion. Second of all, again, you look at the land grants where they are given their land and whose seal is on it for the King of England. And so I think they wanted no part of this really for the most part. That's kind of a blanket statement. It's not 100% true, but for the most part, a lot of the people here wanted to stay neutral. They wanted to stay out of it if they weren't outright loyalists at first. And so Tennant and Drake come up. They try to convince the people here to join in. They refuse, and they say, we're going to cut off trade with Charleston if you don't join. Do what you have to. As time goes on, really, and it's something that I'd like to do more research on is about kind of that time period between the outbreak of the American Revolution in 1780 here in the backcountry after Tennant Drayton. But really, of course, South Carolina, although you have the battle at what was then called Fort Sullivan and some action in '96, really a lot of South Carolina is not really affected directly by the American Revolution up until, of course, the Southern strategy, and you have the siege and capture of Savannah, and then the siege and capture of Charleston. And so at that point, what you have is, again, the war is being brought to their doorstep. And again, some of these folks want to remain neutral. Some want to, fight for the loyalist side. And really, there's a couple of things that happen. In some cases, you have some coercion that goes on. In other cases, you have incentives that are given for people to fight. And in other cases, you have people that are motivated by what the other side has done to them. And so you see this a lot in some of the communities where you have Bloody Bill Cunningham, Bannister Charlton, these guys like that, who commit basically outrages. They commit massacres, they burn houses, they steal slaves, steal property. They cause some of the people that are here to join one side or the other, especially going towards the Patriot side. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But this is Bannister Charlton there. It's very interesting. He's such a hated figure here, but then he goes home after the war and is elected to Parliament and has just a normal career. And so, of course, hey, look at this. That's where we are. Yeah, yeah, it looks a little familiar there. But anyway, of course, as many of y'all probably know, this is a reconstruction of the trading post that would become known as the Cayce House, but would start off as the Kershaw Chestnut trading post. And so, of course, this trading post is established. You have the establishment of Friday's Ferry. Because of those two businesses, you have the growth of a community that becomes known as Granby. And so Granby is named after a British royal who fought for colonial rights. So like many other places, this trading post is fortified. And so they built a palisade wall around it. I'll go ahead. And so this is another drawing, an artist's rendition of the Cayce House. So, of course, this is what it looked like when it became fortified here. And so the British, basically, they enter into the backcountry to try, and what the British thought was going to happen, they thought that basically the South Carolina and some of these other southern states, but especially South Carolina, were completely loyalist, that there was this wave of, I guess what you would call patriotism that was going to take over when they came in, and basically a large number of people were going to join the loyalist militia groups, and they were going to be able to go up and basically attack Washington and the Continental Army from the south. And of course, that is not what they found here. But they take over some of these forts in the backcountry. Fort Granby, as it becomes known as, is very important again because it is right at a place where you've got these 3 trading paths coming together, and it is also vital to the control of Friday's Ferry right there. So the British, they take over, and by 1781, you've got a British major named Andrew Maxwell, who is here with about 300 men. There may be more enslaved people beyond that as well. But the Patriots, led by Thomas Sumter, decide that they really need to control this. This is something they need to get the British out of. And so there's 2 attempts to capture this by Thomas Sumter and his troops. The first attempt was on February 19, 1781. Thomas Sumter laid siege to it. And basically what they would do is they would approach building kind of protection using logs and tobacco hogsheads. So tobacco was the big cash crop for Saxe-Gotha at that point. But Thomas Sumter heard rumors that reinforcements were coming, and so he abandoned the siege 2 days later on February 21st. So really, he kind of gets out of Dodge after that. But again, it's something that he knows is very important to kind of control of the backcountry. So he tries again, and he starts another siege on May 2nd, 1781. This time he's got more men. He's got about 400 to 500 men. So after 2 days, though, Thomas Sumter decides that now is a great time to attack Orangeburg. And I don't know enough really why he decided that. But either way, he takes a majority of his forces and leaves to go attack Orangeburg. And he leaves a small contingent of men to lay siege to Fort Granby, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Light Horse Harry Lee. And of course, Light Horse Harry Lee was a very prominent Revolutionary War general, soldier in his own right, but would later become famous as the father of Robert E. Lee. So they take Lieutenant Colonel Light Horse Harry Lee takes over on May 14th, and he actually erects a battery that can fire down into the fort. And at that point, Maxwell knows that the game is over. That basically there's no chance that they can hold out. So the next day, May 15th, 1781, he sues for peace. They start negotiations. And basically, Maxwell says, hey, we will surrender the fort if you allow us to keep all the stuff we stole from the people in the neighborhood. And Light Horse Harry Lee agrees to that condition, which I think does not make him very popular with the people here, because as the troops are leaving, they're like, hey, that's my armed arm. That's my trunk going right there. So the other thing, this is very interesting. We had a professor from USC speak to people at the museum last week, I think it was. And anyway, so one of the things that occurs is that some of the people around here were still very reluctant to get involved in the war, and so they tried to boost enrollment in the militia, the Patriot militia. And one of the things that you see is that basically money was worthless at that time. I mean, again, you've got this currency, but it's basically worthless. Inflation's high. Nobody knows if it's going to be good in 6 months and a year. So there's no reason for these people to join and get paid. And so what happens is that a lot of these, some of the loyalist militias, some of the British, they're encouraging. First of all, they're capturing, some slaves and property. And they're also they are enticing some slaves to flee their masters, and they said, we'll give you freedom if you fight for us. And so when the Patriots defeat some of these loyalist militia groups and these British soldiers, basically there's property that's been stolen, and there's slaves that are either stolen or have fled to the British lines. And so they take these slaves, and then they say, hey, our money's no good, but what if we give you slaves? And so a lot of people in this area were like, yeah, okay, now you got me on board at that point. So a very interesting presentation. So the other thing that occurs is that when the British still have control of Fort Granby, I mentioned before there's Dreer's Fort, that's kind of where River Bluff High School is today, right there where 12 Mile Creek flows into the Saluda. Godfrey Dreer was a supporter of the Patriots, apparently before anything really occurred to kind of convince him, he didn't need convincing. He was a supporter of the Patriots. He was older, but he provided foodstuffs to the Patriot Army. He helped feed them. And his son, Godfrey Dreer Jr., was, joined the Patriot Army, Patriot Militia. Well, according to the story, the soldiers and commanders at Fort Granby knew about this, and so they sent a detachment of soldiers to basically burn Dreer's fort down and to capture Godfrey Dreer Jr. Well, they make their way there. The family becomes aware of this attempt to burn the place and to capture Godfrey Dreer Jr., so they decide to try to trick these soldiers. So Godfrey Dreer Jr. sends his family to the second floor of the house and basically gives them pots and pans, tells them to stomp, because he wants the soldiers that are coming to think that there's an army there. And that's what they do. They apparently get upstairs and they make as much noise as possible. And so apparently when the soldiers arrive, they're like, oh my gosh, there's a whole lot more people here than we anticipated. So they're already afraid. When the first soldier enters into the house, Godfrey Dreer Jr. is on the steps leading up to the second floor. He fires, he kills one of them, and at that point they flee, because they think that there's many armed men there. And so, anyway, we've got an interpretive panel on the River Bluff that explains that now. All right. So, this is another battle that I'd like to talk about. So, this is called Juniper Springs. This happened a month after the fall of Fort Granby. This happened in June 18, 1781. So not only Fort Granby, but the Star Fort at 96 was under siege at this point. And so you have basically reinforcements going to relieve the siege. And so there was a Loyalist militia led by Lord Francis Rawdon that was on their way to relieve the siege of 96. And you had a commander named Colonel Charles Middleton. He was under Thomas Sumter. He was following Rawdon's troops and kind of harassing them along the way, kind of these guerrilla tactics. Well, anyway, Francis Rawdon, he had had enough of his men being kind of attacked and harassed on the way, and so he laid a trap for Charles Middleton and his troops. And so this battle occurred right, basically almost exactly where Gilbert is today. Kind of Peach Festival Road. And so he laid a trap where he sent a small contingent of his troops to attack the Patriot militia. They attacked them, then they retreated, and Middleton ordered his troops to follow. And he led them right into an ambush where Rawdon's larger troops were located. And so it was a big defeat for the Patriot militia, with 4 officers and 30 men killed or captured. So very not good for our side here. But so this is a historic marker that was erected several years ago. This is located right in the town of Gilbert. It's the old school. It's no longer the school, but I think SLED uses it now for training. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So this is a site called Vaudet's Oldfield. And this is, I'll go forward a little bit here. So just to kind of give you an idea. So this is located, north of Gilbert. This is northeast of Batesburg-Leesville. So this is Oldfield Road right here. This is Cedar Grove Road. So if you go west from Lexington on Highway 1, there's the, I think it's, what is it, KJ's or something, IGA, I can't remember. It's right there, right in that community they call Murray. Well, anyway, so Vaudet's Oldfield is kind of a result of Juniper Springs. So the British, head a little bit west from, northwest, I should say, from Juniper Springs, and there they kind of rest and regroup. And so they bury their dead. They also bury some Patriot militia members. It's kind of interesting that they do that. And there's also 2 men that they decide to hang. And so they hang them from a post oak. Well, what you see is that, again, there's rumors that the majority of Sumter's men are coming to find them. And so they basically leave so quickly that they leave the men hanging on the tree. A man named William Cayce came 3 months later, and he said he found these men still hanging from the tree when he arrived. And so he buried them, and he said in his kind of notes that he saw 4 British graves, 4 Patriots, and the graves of the 2 hanging there. And so, I showed the picture earlier. If I can find it. Yeah, so this is the field today. Also, we think it was Van Sant. We think that was the name. It got corrupted to Baudin. Probably 6 months ago, I got an email from a guy in France. His last name was Baudin, and he was researching Baudins in America, and he said that he had never seen the name Baudin in South Carolina before, and he wanted to know more, and I had to disappoint him and say, well, you still have it, because it probably wasn't Baudin. But anyway, this is very interesting to me, because at least as far as I'm aware, nobody knows who put those gravestones up. It is on private property, and the 250th Committee is in touch with the owners. We'd like to do something with the site. But we went out there with members of the SAR and DAR, and they did not do it. So I don't know who marked those graves. I mean, I'm very glad that they did, but still kind of a bit of a mystery.
You're in Copter's movie.
Huh?
You caught yourself here in that picture.
Oh, yeah. I saw my shadow there, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So this is a picture I stole from the newspaper there, but this is Terror Springs. So this was an area that was owned by a man named Andrew Terror, and it was a natural springs. It is located in Lexington, the town of Lexington, right where Lexington School District 1 headquarters are. So go on Highway 1, and right before you kind of get into town limits, it's right there on the right. But anyway, so I think this is, kind of emblematic in some ways of some of the skirmishes that occurred around here. But this occurred on November 16th, 1981. And there was a loyalist militia group led by Colonel Hezekiah Williams, and they had stolen cattle from local landowners. And so they had taken the cattle to the spring to drink and to kind of rest and regroup. But at the same time, the Patriot Militia group under Captain Sterling Turner, they were pursuing them. And so they caught up to them at the spring, and they exchanged a few shots. And basically, Colonel Williams of the Loyalist group said, hey, we will give you back the cattle if you let us go. And that's what they agreed on. So no deaths occurred there, but it was a it was a skirmish of note, I guess. So if you go there today, there is a pond that's there. That pond was not originally there. That pond is a result of a quarry that was there. All right. So, but Terror Springs leads to Clouds Creek. And so Clouds Creek occurs the next day, November 17th, 1781. And this was perhaps one of the most notable Revolutionary War occurrences that happened in the boundaries of Lexington County. So this, I'll show you a map kind of showing the modern location of it, but basically it occurred where Lick Creek is today, near the crossing of Highway 391. So it's on land owned by the Barr family today. Anyway, at that point, Lick Creek, it's a tributary of Clouds Creek, and I guess it was known as Clouds Creek. But that Patriot militia that got the cattle back at Terror Springs, they went west after Terror Springs. And so they made it to Lick Creek, and they decided to rest and regroup. Or at least Captain Sterling Turner did. There was a man who was a member of the militia named Captain James Butler and his son. And apparently the Butlers, they were all from, kind of close by in what's now Saluda County, and they were against it. They said, we should not relax here, we should not rest. But either way, Sterling Turner ignored their advice, and they encamped there. Well, they were surprised by Bloody Bill Cunningham and his troops. And so Bloody Bill Cunningham, he was a loyalist, he was a native. He had originally become a patriot, but had changed sides. And I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, but he hated the Butler family because of an earlier incident where one of his friends had been killed by the Butlers in battle, and so he kind of wanted his revenge. So he had a much larger force. He surrounds the Patriot militia. The Patriot militia, they realize that, you know, there's no escape, and there's no way they can fight back, that they're outnumbered. So they attempt to surrender. Bloody Bill Cunningham says, no quarter, no surrender. And so there is an unfinished log structure on the property nearby. The Patriot militia runs for their lives. They make it to the log structure. They try to fight back as best they can, but there's just too many men, and so they are mostly, we think, killed by bayonet or saber, and so they're killed at very close range. And so there were, I believe, 22 men in the Patriot militia group, and all but 2 were killed. So 2 were allowed to escape. After that, Bloody Bill Cunningham orders that their bodies are not to be buried. Members of the Butler family, including James Butler's daughter, the younger James Butler's sister, come and basically beg Bloody Bill Cunningham to relent on this, which he does, and so they are buried there on the site. There's actually a marked grave for Captain James Butler, so this is in between Devil's Backbone and Howard.
What happened to the marker there?
So it's still there. It's
Is it-
still
is it
there.
just dirt? It's
Yeah.
like it's on the ground. But it's,
Yeah.
it's not, it's,
I was told it was still there. I've never seen it, believe it or not. So yeah. So this is a site that. Well, let me go back here. All right. So this was there was an historic marker that existed to mark this battle. It was on Highway 391, and the story I was told is that it was knocked down by people 3 times, and it was kind of thrown in the swamp. And so the 3rd time it happened, nobody could find it, and it was found something like 8 years later and brought to the museum. And so we now have this old marker in our collections at the museum. But unfortunately, it was damaged beyond repair where you could not attach it to the pole that it goes on. So we actually gave this to the town of Batesburg-Leesville at one point because they wanted to have it repaired and they wanted to put it near the National Guard Armory in kind of a Veterans Memorial Park. But again, it was broken. They didn't realize that, and also Archives and History said we don't really want you doing that. So they gave it back to us. So we still have it at the museum. But the 250th committee got a grant, and so we're in the process of having a new marker made that's going to go on 391 up here a little bit. And this is more information I'll ever need to know. But, I have not spoken directly to the landowners. Mr. Bill Barr was an archaeologist, and he was actually on my board. And, I tried to get in touch with him for months, not only about the commission because he had missed a few meetings, but also because I wanted to talk to him about the land there to see what we could do. And unfortunately, I found by searching his name on the internet that he had passed away. And so, it's very sad, but it made sense why he was not returning emails or phone calls. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So,
That would be scary.
yeah. But anyway, so I believe his, some of his, whoever inherited the estate owns the property now. And I have not been in touch with them, but, oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank on his name now. Gosh darn it. Anyway, guy from Edgefield. He's a historian in Edgefield. Anyway, it'll come to me. But he, at one point, had told me that he had been in contact with the family and that they had not agreed, but they seemed open to opening up the site for visitors and to let people see, the marked grave. So, but I had not been out there, unfortunately. So, yeah, somebody told me that they did not. I don't know. I've heard different things. Some people said they didn't want people out there, and they were very not nice. But I don't know. So anyway, but yeah. So, but moving forward. Again, it's very interesting that, even though the war kind of moves out of South Carolina, Again, you have some of the rifts that remain. So you've got, again, this upcountry, backcountry split that's not really resolved until, they move the state capital to Columbia and open up the legislature to more of the backcountry. And even then, and I don't know exactly how true this necessarily is, but I've heard multiple people tell me that, moving farther north from where we are today in the Dutch Fork area, that, you've got Prosperity, which, was kind of the dividing line in some ways between the more Scots-Irish communities farther north and to the west and Germanic communities that were a little to the south. And apparently the Scots-Irish people did not take too kindly to the fact that a lot of these Germans had been, loyal to the British at first and remained neutral. And so I've heard a couple people tell me that there was a dividing line called the deadline, and you didn't go on either side of it. There was, I think that's probably very much an exaggeration, but I think it kind of is symbolic of, the kind of differences that remain even after the American Revolution. But anyway, yeah, so I think that's about all I got for you for the American Revolution. I hope y'all enjoyed it. Before I let you go, a few things. So, like I said, I am part of the 250th committee, and we invite. It's open to anybody. If you are interested and want to get involved, we invite you to come out. We meet the second Thursday of the even-numbered months at 11 a.m. We meet at different locations, but the next meeting will be on August 13th at 11 a.m. at the Lexington County Main Library in Lexington. And so we invite you to come out, and I can put you on the email list, even if you just want to be on the email list. We've done a big event we had at the Lexington Old Mill Walking Trail, where we commemorated the Battle of Lexington and Concord, which was the namesake for Lexington County and the town of Lexington. One thing, and I'll give Andy credit for this, he came up with the Battle of Lexington and Concord was called a shot heard around the world. And so what we did is there's a distillery outside Vicksburg, Beesville called Hollow Creek, and we did a shot of their whiskey. But either way, so we did that. And again, we've gotten money to install interpretive panels and historic markers for some of the battle sites and skirmishes. David did an excellent job creating an interpretive panel for Friday's Ferry and the DAR, and you might help with that too with the historic marker that's up at Kelly Jones Park. And then we've got an interpretive panel that was put up for Drew's Fort at River Bluff. And then we're working on, they're in production, the historic markers for Fort Granby and Clouds Creek as well. So, but we're kind of, meeting next month to talk about our next steps about what to do with some of these sites that are on private property, whether to try to pursue getting some kind of pull-off or getting access to this private property or what. But anyway, we invite you if you're interested. Any questions about anything? I know I threw a lot at you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I've got some brochures here for the museum if you're interested. If you haven't been to the museum, I invite you to come out. We've got 30 historic structures on the property. It's about 6 acres. We're open Tuesday through Saturday, 10 to 4, Sunday 1 to 4, but the brochure has got more information. So, before I let you go, I'll tell, because we got like 2 minutes here, how about that? I'll tell one more quick story. I always love it. It has nothing to do with the American Revolution. So in downtown Lexington, there is a 2-story brick structure right next to the old courthouse that was originally a pharmacy. It was built in 1917 after a fire swept through downtown Lexington in 1916. And it was built for a man named Rice Harmon. And so Rice Harmon was something else, I'll tell you. But either way, so one day, Rice Harmon decided to open up for business, April 6th, 1919. Normally, not a big deal, but April 6th, 1919 was a Sunday, and the town apparently had blue laws where you couldn't do certain types of business on Sunday. But either way, he decided to open up. Everything was going okay until the town police officer comes by, sees that Rice is open, goes inside, and basically says, Rice, what are you doing? You're breaking the law. It's Sunday, you can't be open. And Rice said, well, I've got customers, they need medicine, supplies, I can't say no. So this went back and forth until it became an argument, and then apparently it became a fist fight. Now, the state newspaper article about this said that Rice was a small man, so he felt threatened by the police officer, which I think means he was losing the fight. Either way, he thought it was a good idea to take his pistol out. So Rice Harmon takes his pistol out, he takes 3 shots at the police officer, he misses all 3 times. The police officer then takes his pistol out, he didn't miss. He shoots Rice in the leg. Sheriff rushes to the scene, actually places the police officer under arrest, I think just to kind of sort things out. They rush Rice Harmon to the hospital in Columbia, where they save his life. No charges were brought because of this, but what makes it my favorite story is a few years later, Rice Harmon ends up marrying the daughter of the police officer that shot him. I always said Thanksgiving had to be a real proper time.